Hello, welcome back to the Phantom Diary channel. I'm sure there are many of you listening to my stories to fall asleep. Before we start, write in the comments what country you're listening from. If you feel fear, you should like and subscribe this channel. So, let's go. The trees towered over me like ancient sentinels, their leaves whispering in the wind. The air was thick with the earthy smell of damp soil and pine. I was used to the sounds of the woods, the crunch of leaves underfoot, the occasional chirp of birds, and the distant rustle of animals in the underbrush. But today was different. It started small, just an odd sensation, like the trees were watching me. I shook it off. Forests can do that to you, especially when you're alone for too long. Your mind plays tricks, but then I heard it. A faint whisper, barely audible, but unmistakable. I stopped in my tracks, straining to listen. Nothing. I laughed nervously to myself and continued walking, but the whisper came again. This time, clearer. It was a voice, soft and low, too close to be a passing breeze. I spun around, half expecting to see someone behind me, but there was nothing, just the endless trees, their shadows stretching across the ground. I picked up my pace, trying to shake the feeling of being watched. Another whisper, more distinct this time. Turn back. I froze. The voice seemed to echo around me, coming from every direction, but no one was there. My heart started racing. My palms went clammy. I had to be hearing things, right? I looked up at the trees, their branches swaying gently in the wind. The forest looked completely normal, peaceful even, yet the voice had sounded so real, so close. I felt a chill creeping up my spine. Turn back now. The voice came again, a bit louder this time, as if urging me to leave. But I wasn't going to let some strange sound send me running. I had hiked these woods alone before, and nothing had ever happened. I forced myself to keep walking, my steps quickening, trying to ignore the growing unease. But then, the air grew thick. It felt like the forest itself was pressing in on me, the trees seeming to lean closer, their branches twisting as if reaching for me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me, watching me, hidden just out of sight. Another whisper, this time much louder, almost desperate. You should leave. I stopped in my tracks, my breath catching in my throat. Something was wrong. I was alone, yet it felt like I wasn't. There was an undeniable weight in the air, like the entire forest was alive with unseen eyes. I turned around again, searching the dense underbrush, but there was no one. No movement, no sign of life, just trees, the same as always. But that whisper, that soft voice, it was as though the forest itself was speaking to me. Without thinking, I took a step backward. The rustling of the trees seemed louder now, almost urgent. I glanced up, and for the briefest moment I thought I saw something. A figure, a shadow moving between the trunks, just on the edge of my vision. I spun around, my breath quick and shallow, but there was nothing there. Just the thick forest, silent and still. The whispers gone. I shook my head, trying to calm myself. You're just tired, I muttered. It's nothing, just your mind playing tricks. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. Something felt wrong. I tried to turn back and head toward the trail, but the path seemed unfamiliar. The trees around me looked different, more twisted, as though the forest itself had shifted. I had been walking the same trail for hours, but now it felt as if the woods were closing in on me, blocking my way. Leave now. The voice came again, louder than ever, like it was coming from deep within the trees, surrounding me. I felt my pulse hammer in my chest, panic rising. I turned around, about to run, when I caught sight of something that made my blood run cold. There, standing just beyond the trees, was a figure, tall and thin, completely still. The shadow was too solid to be a trick of the light, For a moment, it looked like a person, but its features were obscured, swallowed by the darkness of the forest. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, but my voice felt frozen in my throat. The figure didn't move. It didn't even seem to breathe. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it was gone. I didn't wait around to see if it would return. My legs moved before my brain could process what had just happened. I turned and ran, weaving through the trees, ignoring the branches that scraped at my skin, the roots that tripped me. I couldn't look back. I couldn't stop running. The forest, which had once felt like a sanctuary, now seemed like a maze, twisting and shifting in ways I couldn't understand. I ran until I finally saw the edge of the woods ahead, light streaming in from the open space beyond. When I stumbled out of the trees, gasping for breath, I didn't look back. I didn't care to know what had been following me or what had been whispering in the trees. I only knew one thing. I was never going back into that forest again. We set up near a creek, and after a hearty dinner, we decided to take a late-night walk through the woods. The forest was alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures, and the moonlight barely pierced the canopy above. At first, the walk was peaceful. Our flashlights cut through the darkness in front of us, and the crunch of our boots on the forest floor was the only sound that seemed to matter. The trees were thick, towering over us, and the air had a cool crispness to it. Everything felt safe, familiar, but after a while I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I glanced back toward the campsite. The fire was barely visible from here, the light flickering faintly against the dark outline of trees. I pushed the unsettling thought away. It was just my imagination. "Let's go deeper," said Mark, one of my friends, his voice cheerful, but a little too eager. "The stars are so much clearer further in." Against my better judgment, I followed. The deeper we went into the forest, the more the sounds of the night grew distant. It wasn't completely quiet, it was almost as if the forest was holding its breath. The rustle of leaves seemed to get softer, and even the wind, through the trees, felt muted. I wasn't the only one who noticed. "Anyone else feel like it's too quiet?" Laura asked, her voice a little shaky. She was usually the tough one. I nodded. "Yeah, it feels like something's wrong." We stopped for a moment. The air felt colder now, and my breath started to come out in short puffs. I glanced around, squinting through the trees. The shadows seemed to move, shifting unnaturally. I thought I saw a figure, a silhouette just beyond the reach of my flashlight's beam. But when I turned the light that way, there was nothing. "Let's head back," I said, my voice firm despite the unease growing inside me. "It's getting late, and I don't like the way this feels." But Mark wasn't listening. "Come on, just a little further," he urged, stepping forward into the shadows. Against my instincts, I followed. I didn't want to be the one to spoil the fun. We walked a little farther, but I kept looking behind us, feeling like we were being watched. Every now and then, I thought I saw movement in the trees, something shifting out of place. "Seriously, I don't like this," Laura whispered. I didn't need her to say it. I felt it too. The silence around us was suffocating, and the moon seemed dimmer now, hidden by thick clouds that had rolled in without us noticing. Then I heard it. A faint sound like footsteps crunching on dry leaves. I froze. The others didn't seem to hear it. I whipped around, my flashlight sweeping over the trees behind us. Nothing. "You okay?" Mark asked, looking back. "Yeah, just..." "I thought I heard something," I muttered, trying to play it off, but my heart was racing. We pressed on, but the sounds around us seemed to grow. First, it was footsteps, then whispers, distant voices that we couldn't quite make out. I could hear them just beyond the edge of the trees, soft, like a conversation, but no one else was there. I reached for my phone, but there was no signal. "This isn't funny anymore," Laura said. Her voice was tight, and I could hear the fear creeping in. "Let's go," I said, turning back toward the direction we came from. My feet felt heavy as if the ground beneath me was pulling me down. I could sense that something was following us. As we turned to leave, a figure appeared in the distance, just at the edge of the light from our flashlights. It wasn't a person. Not quite. It was tall, impossibly tall, with dark flowing shadows that seemed to twist and move with it. The figure stood perfectly still, just beyond the reach of our lights, and for a moment, I could have sworn it was staring at us. I was frozen. I couldn't take my eyes off it. "Do you see that?" I breathed, my voice barely a whisper. But when I turned back to look at my friends, I saw their faces. They had already noticed. Laura's face was pale, her eyes wide with terror. Mark was shaking his head, trying to dismiss it, but the tremor in his voice told me he wasn't convinced. "We need to get out of here," I said, my feet finally moving. We turned and bolted back the way we came. I didn't look behind me. I couldn't. All I could hear was the pounding of my own heart in my chest and the sound of our footsteps, now joined by something else. Something moving just behind us, mimicking our every step. We didn't stop running until we reached the campsite. When we stumbled into the clearing, gasping for air, the fire was still burning, casting long shadows across the ground. But there was something else. The forest, the trees. It was as though they were quiet again, as if whatever had been watching us was gone. We didn't speak much after that. We packed up quickly, not wanting to linger another moment. The sun had just begun to dip below the horizon as I walked through the woods, the golden light filtering through the trees. It was supposed to be a peaceful evening hike, just me in the forest, a chance to clear my mind. I wasn't supposed to be afraid. I've hiked these trails dozens of times, but tonight was different. The wind was still and the usual sounds of the forest, birds chirping, leaves rustling, had faded. There was only the crunch of my boots on the forest floor. I pulled my jacket tighter around me, the sudden chill creeping under my skin. I'd planned to head back by sunset, but something urged me to go deeper. The deeper I went, the quieter it became. It was an oppressive kind of silence, like the woods themselves were holding their breath. I had reached a part of the trail where the trees grew so thick they blocked out most of the fading light. The shadows were long and stretching, creating strange, contorted shapes on the forest floor. I paused, my senses on edge. I wasn't alone. I couldn't explain it. It wasn't just a feeling of being watched. It was something more. It was a presence, like something unseen was just behind the trees, lurking. I scanned the area, but all I could see were the thick trunks of pine trees and the darkening underbrush. Heart thudded in my chest, but I tried to calm myself. "It's just my imagination," I told myself. "The forest plays tricks on you sometimes." I continued walking, but every few steps I felt that sensation again, that prickle at the back of my neck. It was as though someone, or something, was moving, just out of sight, following me. The feeling grew stronger with each step until I could no longer ignore it. I turned around quickly, but there was nothing. No one. But then I saw it, just at the edge of my vision, a shadow, shifting between the trees. Not like an animal, but something more deliberate, something human. I froze. I shouldn't have been so curious. I should have turned around and gone back, but instead, I walked toward it. Slowly. Cautiously. The shadows seemed to move with me, just out of reach. It was like the forest itself was alive, like the trees were closing in around me, and the darkness was thickening. Every time I looked away, the figure moved closer. I could hear faint steps, too soft, too light, but there nonetheless. Suddenly, I stopped in my tracks. I could hear breathing. It was soft at first, almost like the wind, but then it became clearer, deeper. A breath, a person breathing. I turned around again, panic rising in my chest. My heart raced, but when I spun, there was nothing, not a soul in sight. The trees stood still, casting long shadows over the forest floor, and yet I could still feel it. The presence, just beyond the trees. I backed up, slowly. The sense of dread weighed heavy in my chest. The air was thick and suffocating, pressing down on me with a pressure I couldn't shake. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling. "Is someone there?" No response, just the wind. And then, just as I was about to turn and run, I heard it. A whisper. It was faint, like a soft murmur carried on the breeze, but I could hear it clearly. "Don't run." My blood ran cold. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I turned and bolted. I didn't care anymore about the path or whether I was heading in the right direction. I just needed to get out of there. I pushed through the underbrush, branches scratching at my arms, my breath coming in gasps. Behind me, I heard the sound of movement. Too quick, too close. I pushed harder, my legs burning, my chest aching. I could hear the figure now, its footsteps matching mine, closing in. It was chasing me. I didn't stop until the trees started to thin, and the distant lights of the nearby campsite became visible. I stumbled onto the gravel road, my heart still pounding in my ears. My breath was shallow, my eyes wide, but there was nothing there. No figure, no shadow, just the empty road and the distant campfire. I looked back into the forest. The trees were still. The woods were quiet again. But I knew. Something was in there. Something was waiting. Watching. We were supposed to be on a relaxing hike. Just me, my friend Cam, and a stretch of forest trail that wound through the national park. The sun was warm, the path soft with fallen leaves, and the only sounds were birds and the distant whisper of wind through the trees. It started off perfect. We joked, took pictures, and pointed out odd mushrooms and twisted roots. The deeper we went, the quieter the woods got. But it felt peaceful. Still, until it didn't. We were about 4 miles in when Cam stopped walking. I nearly bumped into him. "Did you hear that?" he asked. I paused. "Nothing, just the wind." "No," I said, glancing around. "What did it sound like?" He shrugged. "I don't know. Like footsteps. Behind us." I turned back. The trail behind us was empty, the sunlight filtering down in lazy golden beams. Still, I felt it too then, that little twinge in my gut, that prickle at the back of the neck when you know someone's watching. We kept going, a bit quieter now. The path narrowed and the trees grew closer together. Shadows stretched longer. It wasn't even late, but it suddenly felt off. About 15 minutes later, I heard it too. Crunch, crunch, leaves behind us. I spun around. Nothing. We laughed it off. "Probably a squirrel," I said, though my voice was too high. We picked up the pace. The path curved, and we found ourselves in a darker part of the forest. The canopy above blocked out most of the light. It felt cooler, quieter. That's when we heard the whistle. Just a single low note. It came from somewhere to our right, beyond the trees. Cam froze. "That wasn't a bird," he whispered. I nodded slowly. "No, that was a person." But we hadn't seen anyone else since we started the hike. We didn't run, but we walked faster, our eyes darting to the sides of the trail. I kept expecting to see someone through the trees. A shadow, a shape, something. But there was never anything there. Then it whistled again, this time to the left. I stopped. "Are they following us?" "I don't know," Cam said, his voice tight. "Let's just keep moving." We didn't speak after that. We just moved, quickly. But the forest felt different now, like the trees were too quiet, like we were being herded. At one point, I swear, I saw something move just beyond the tree line. A tall figure, pale, watching us. But when I looked again, it was gone. The whistling started again. Closer, higher this time, almost like a tune. I couldn't place the melody, but it didn't feel right. It felt wrong. Mocking? We finally reached the fork in the trail. Left would lead us deeper. Right was the way out. We turned right. The whistling stopped. We didn't look back. We just kept going, the sunlight starting to return as the trees thinned. Every so often, I thought I heard something. Twigs snapping behind us, a soft breath of movement. But when I glanced over my shoulder, there was only the trail. By the time we reached the car, the forest felt normal again. Birds were chirping. The sun was shining. It was as if nothing had happened. Cam and I didn't talk about it. Not on the drive home, not after. But sometimes, when I'm alone in the woods now, I swear I hear that same whistle. Just a single note. And then, silence. It was supposed to be a simple hike. Just a few hours in the woods to enjoy the fresh air, stretch our legs, and get away from the chaos of city life. My friends, Jake, Emma, and I had made plans the night before. We'd wake up early, hike to the old cabin in the woods, and then make our way back before dark. Nothing fancy, just nature. But as soon as we stepped into the forest, something felt off. The trees towered above us, their branches creaking in the wind. The ground beneath our feet was soft, the dirt squelching as we made our way through the dense undergrowth. The smell of pine and damp earth hung thick in the air, and the silence was almost suffocating. Not a bird chirped. No animals scurried. In the underbrush, it was as if the forest was holding its breath. Is it just me, or is it too quiet? I asked, glancing around uneasily. Jake laughed, trying to lighten the mood. You're just being paranoid. It's a forest, that's all. You're not used to being out here. But even he seemed unnerved, his voice a little too tight. We pressed on, the path narrowing as we ventured deeper into the woods. The sunlight filtered through the thick canopy, casting long, eerie shadows on the forest floor. It felt like the trees were closing in on us, trapping us in some kind of ancient, forgotten place. After a while, we reached a small clearing, a perfect spot to rest, or so we thought. We dropped our backpacks, sat down on the cool grass, and began chatting. But every time I looked toward the trees, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. I tried to ignore it, chalking it up to my nerves, but the feeling only grew stronger. Emma was the first to notice something odd. She was standing at the edge of the clearing, staring at something in the trees. "Do you guys see that?" she asked, her voice trembling. We all turned toward her, following her gaze. At first, I thought it was just another shadow, but then I saw it. A figure, barely visible through the dense foliage. It was standing very still, its outline hidden in the shadows. I squinted, trying to make out what it was. It wasn't moving, but it was there, and it was too still, almost too unnatural. "Maybe it's just an animal," Jake said, though I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "I don't think so," Emma replied, her eyes wide with fear. "It's standing too straight, too tall." We stared at it, waiting for it to move, but it didn't. The forest felt even quieter now, the silence oppressive. The figure seemed to be getting closer, though it was hard to tell. The shadows shifted, and I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. "We need to go," I said suddenly, my voice tight. I didn't know why, but I knew we needed to leave. Something wasn't right. We packed up quickly, the air feeling colder as we hurriedly put our gear back in our bags. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see the figure emerging from the trees, but it remained hidden, silent. Just as we began walking back, I heard it, a rustling sound coming from the direction we had just been. It wasn't the wind. This was movement. Slow, deliberate steps, as if someone or something was following us. I couldn't stop my heart from racing. I glanced at Jake and Emma, but neither of them seemed to hear it. They were too focused on the path ahead, walking faster now, as if they could feel the tension building. "I heard something," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Jake stopped. "What do you mean, You heard something? That sound. Someone's out there, I replied, my voice shaking. We all turned to look, but the trees were still, the shadows long and dark, just as they had been before. But I knew something was out there, watching, waiting. A branch snapped in the distance. Without thinking, we all started to run, our footsteps quickening as panic set in. The sound of someone, was getting closer. But when I dared to glance over my shoulder, there was nothing, just the endless forest stretching out behind us, as dark and still as ever. We reached the edge of the forest, the trees beginning to thin, and only then did I allow myself to breathe again. The air felt lighter, and the oppressive weight that had settled over us seemed to lift. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still there, watching us from the shadows. As we emerged from the trees, I turned back one last time, half expecting to see something in the distance. But there was only the quiet, peaceful forest, the same forest we had walked into hours before. We didn't speak much on the way back to the car, the silence between us heavy with the unspoken. It wasn't until we reached the parking lot that Emma spoke. "I know what I saw," she said, her voice quiet, almost to herself. "It was watching us, and I don't think it was human." None of us said anything after that. We just got in the car and drove away, the forest retreating behind us as the sun began to set. It was supposed to be a simple hike, a short walk through the woods to clear our minds after a long week of work. My friends, Sam, Rachel, and I, had done this a dozen times before, so when we decided to take the trail through the old forest, we weren't expecting anything out of the ordinary. The sun had begun to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows across the forest floor. The air was cool and crisp, and the smell of pine mixed with the earthy scent of damp leaves. Everything felt calm, peaceful. We reached the beginning of the trail, a narrow path bordered by towering oaks and dense underbrush. "Let's go a little further than usual," Rachel suggested, her voice light and carefree. "We've always stayed close to the entrance before. Why not see where it leads?" I shrugged, agreeing with her. "Sure, why not?" As we walked deeper into the woods, the sounds of the outside world faded away, replaced by the chirping of distant birds and the rustling of leaves underfoot. There was something peaceful about being surrounded by so much life, but the deeper we went, the more I started to feel an odd, unshakable sense of unease. The path wound through the trees, twisting and turning in ways I didn't remember from the last time we hiked this way. The trees around us seemed to grow closer, their gnarled branches reaching out like arms, blocking out the last bit of fading sunlight. Rachel's voice cut through the silence. "Did you guys hear that?" She stopped, her eyes scanning the woods around us. I frowned. "Hear what?" Sam looked just as confused. "It's probably just a squirrel or something." But Rachel wasn't convinced. Her eyes were wide, her hand hovering over her mouth. No, it sounded like footsteps. She motioned to the underbrush behind us where the shadows seemed to shift in a strange way. I chuckled nervously. "It's probably nothing. Just the wind." But even as I said it, a chill ran down my spine. The forest felt too still, too silent. We kept walking, but my thoughts kept returning to that strange sound. It had been faint, but it wasn't the usual forest noise. It sounded like someone was walking behind us. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone standing there, watching us. The path was narrowing now, the trees pressing in on us. A heavy fog began to settle over the forest floor, thick and white, swirling around our feet like something alive. Sam seemed to notice it first. "That wasn't here before," he said, his voice low and hesitant. "Why is it so foggy all of a sudden?" Rachel shook her head, glancing around nervously. "We need to turn back." But before we could even consider going back, there was that noise again. A rustle, followed by footsteps, just behind us. too close to ignore now. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, my heart racing. "Yes," Sam said, his face pale. "It's coming closer." We all turned to face the dense forest behind us, where the sound had been coming from. But there was nothing, just the fog, creeping in like a blanket. We kept walking faster now, the sense of something, someone, following us, growing stronger. The trees around us seemed to close in tighter with every step, their branches reaching out like claws. Suddenly, Rachel stopped. Her breath hitched, and she pointed ahead. "Do you see that?" At first, I saw nothing, but as my eyes adjusted to the mist, I saw it. A figure standing motionless just off the path. It was tall, impossibly thin, with a shape that was almost indistinct. I couldn't make out its features, but I felt its presence as though it were a heavy weight pressing on my chest. The figure was standing at the edge of the trees, barely visible through the fog. I froze, my blood running cold. "Who's there?" Sam called out, his voice shaking. But there was no answer, just the whispering of the wind through the trees. I turned to Rachel and Sam, both of them looking as terrified as I felt. "Let's go. Now." We didn't look back as we started running, our footsteps heavy on the damp ground, hearts pounding in our chests. The fog thickened around us, but we didn't care. We just wanted to get out of there. I dared one glance over my shoulder. The figure was still there, but now it was closer. Its shape was more defined, its features twisted and wrong, like something inhuman. Its face was pale, and its eyes— no eyes. Just empty, black sockets staring at us. I stumbled, my foot catching on a root, but I quickly regained my footing. We ran faster, the path seeming to stretch on forever, until the fog started to thin, and the trees began to break apart, revealing the entrance to the forest. We burst out of the trees and into the open air, the fog dissipating behind us. We didn't stop running until we reached the parking lot, breathless and terrified. None of us said anything for a long time, but we all knew. Whatever it was, it had been watching us. And as we drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still following us, still watching. It was supposed to be a peaceful hike through the woods. Just me, my backpack, and the quiet of the forest. I'd been feeling a bit overwhelmed lately, and this was my way to clear my mind. The weather was perfect, the air crisp and fresh, and the trees offered a comforting shade as I made my way deeper into the forest. The sun had just begun to set when I reached the trail I had planned to follow, a familiar one I'd hiked many times before. But there was something off this time. The quiet was the first thing I noticed. Normally, there were sounds, the rustling of leaves, birds calling, the occasional squirrel darting through the underbrush. But today, it was almost completely silent. The birds were still, and even the wind seemed to have stopped blowing. I shook it off. Maybe it was just the time of day. It was getting late after all. I continued on, the trail winding through dense thickets of trees. The deeper I went, the darker it became. I pulled out my flashlight from my bag, shining it on the path ahead. The light danced over the bark of the trees, the shadows shifting like figures in the dark. Then I heard it, a soft, barely audible sound behind me, a rustling, like someone, or something, was walking through the leaves. My stomach twisted, but I kept walking. It was probably just a deer or a raccoon, I told myself, but the sound grew closer, closer still. I quickened my pace, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. It was following me. I glanced over my shoulder. The forest was thick with shadows, but I couldn't see anything. Just the trees, the underbrush, the usual darkness. But then, as my light flickered against a tree, I thought I saw something moving in the distance. Just a glimpse, but it was enough to send a chill through me. I turned back to the trail and kept walking, trying to ignore the feeling that I was being watched. My footsteps echoed too loudly in the silence. Suddenly, there was a sound ahead of me, a soft thud. I froze. It came from just off the trail, on the right side. I lifted my flashlight toward the noise and my heart nearly stopped. For a split second, I saw a figure standing between the trees. It was tall, thin, almost skeletal, with long limbs that seemed to stretch out unnaturally. Its face was hidden in shadow, but I could feel its eyes on me. I stood there, frozen, my breath catching in my throat. The figure didn't move, just stood there in the darkness, staring. Then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the figure vanished, slipping back into the woods. I shook my head, blinking hard. I had to be imagining things. It was just the stress, the isolation. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still out there, watching me. I began walking faster, trying to keep calm, but my pulse raced. Every step felt heavier, as if the forest itself was pressing in on me. I came to a clearing up ahead. The last bit of sunlight was slipping behind the horizon, leaving only the fading orange glow in the sky. I considered stopping to rest, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the moment I sat down, I'd never get up again. Instead, I kept moving. Just as I was about to pass through the clearing, I heard it again, the rustling, this time much closer just behind me. I whirled around, my flashlight slicing through the darkness. Nothing. I backed away, my heart pounding in my chest. The air had grown colder, the shadows longer. Then, through the corner of my eye, I saw something dart across the clearing, a blur like a shadow moving too quickly to be human. It was coming straight for me. I didn't stop to look. I bolted. My feet flew across the trail, the flashlight bouncing wildly in my hand. Branches reached out to scratch at my face, but I didn't slow down. The sounds behind me, footsteps, breathing, were getting closer. I wasn't alone anymore. I rounded a bend in the trail, almost tripping over a root. My flashlight fell from my hand and bounced across the ground. The light flickered, casting distorted shadows on the trees. For a moment, I couldn't see anything, just darkness. Then I heard it again, close enough to touch. I turned and saw something standing just ahead. Another figure. This one wasn't moving. It was just standing there in the dark, staring at me. I couldn't make out any details, but I knew it wasn't human. The shape was wrong. I ran faster, ignoring the fear clawing at my chest. I couldn't let it catch me. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it meant me harm. I found the edge of the trail, and I didn't stop running until I reached the road. The light from a passing car was a relief, the sound of the engine louder than anything I'd heard in the forest. I stood there for a moment, gasping for air, my heart still racing. When I looked back at the tree line, the forest seemed peaceful again. Silent, but I knew better. I'd seen what was out there, and it wasn't finished with me yet. Emma, Jake, Laura, and I had been cooped up in the car for hours, and the idea of fresh air and nature was just what we needed to shake off the travel fatigue. We parked near the trailhead, the sun still high in the sky, casting long shadows through the trees. The forest smelled of pine and earth, the air crisp and cool. It was a typical late afternoon, perfect for a walk. "Last one to the clearing is a rotten egg," Jake shouted, already racing ahead, his boots crunching on the dry leaves. I grinned and joined the others, the sounds of our footsteps mingling with the distant calls of birds. The deeper we walked into the forest, the more the outside world faded away. The trees grew taller and closer together, their thick branches blocking out much of the sun. The only light now came in sharp, slanted beams through the canopy above. As we walked, I began to feel it. A presence, subtle but unmistakable. It was as if the trees themselves were watching us. I shook off the thought, after all, it was just a forest, right? But then I heard it. A faint whisper. It wasn't loud, but it was clear enough for me to stop mid-step. I turned toward the others, my pulse quickening. "You guys hear that?" I asked, my voice low. "Hear what?" Laura replied, glancing at me with a raised eyebrow. "I thought I heard something," I said, frowning. It sounded like a soft whisper, too faint to make out the words, but it was definitely there. Jake laughed, not stopping his pace. "It's just the wind. You're fine." I wasn't convinced. The whisper had felt too deliberate, as if someone or something was speaking. Just out of earshot, I shook my head and pressed on, trying to push the unease away. But the feeling didn't go. If anything, it grew stronger. We reached a small clearing and paused for a break. The air here felt heavier, colder, though the sun still shone brightly. I sat down on a fallen log, trying to shake off the lingering discomfort. "That's better," Emma said, catching her breath. "Let's take a few minutes." But just as I was about to reply, I heard it again. A soft whisper, this time closer, almost in my ear. "Leave." I froze. My heart hammered in my chest. I spun around, looking over my shoulder, but there was nothing. Just the trees, the stillness, the overwhelming silence. "Okay, now you're freaking me out," Laura said, noticing my panicked expression. "What's going on?" "I swear, I heard something," I whispered, my voice trembling slightly. "Someone's here." "You're hearing things," Jake said, rolling his eyes. "There's no one out here. It's just the forest, man. You're fine." But I wasn't fine. The whisper had been clear, urgent. "Leave." And it didn't feel like the wind. It felt like someone was trying to communicate, trying to warn us. I stood up and looked around, my eyes scanning the shadows between the trees. For a moment, I thought I saw movement, a dark shape, barely visible, flitting between the trunks. "Did you see that?" I whispered to Jake. He followed my gaze, but when he looked back, his face was calm. "It's just a deer or something. Chill out, okay?" But I couldn't shake the feeling. We weren't alone. I took a step forward, the ground crunching beneath my boots. My eyes darted around and the whisper came again, this time much louder, almost as if it was right behind me. "Leave." This time, I turned around sharply, expecting to find someone standing there, but again, there was nothing, just the trees, the wind rustling through the leaves. I grabbed Jake's arm, pulling him toward the path. "We need to go. Now." "What the hell, man? You're acting weird." "We're fine," he said, pulling away from me. "It's just your imagination." But I wasn't going to wait around to find out. The air felt thick, suffocating, and the whispering in the trees had turned into a low hum, a continuous murmur that was somehow more unnerving than the silence. "We need to go," I urged, almost frantic now. Emma and Laura exchanged looks but followed without argument. We turned back toward the trail, walking faster than we had come, the air growing colder as the forest seemed to close in around us. The trees, once towering and majestic, now felt oppressive, suffocating. The path seemed to stretch longer than it should have, as if the forest itself was trying to keep us there. The whispering followed us, echoing in the distance. "Leave." Finally, we reached the edge of the forest, the sound of the road and distant cars breaking through the trees. The whispering faded, but the chill lingered in the air, crawling down my spine. We didn't speak much as we made our way. Back to the car. There was no need. We had all felt it, the presence, the warning. Whatever was out there, it had been trying to get us to leave. I thought it would be just another walk in the woods, an easy, relaxing escape from the chaos of daily life. My friends and I had been camping for a couple of days, and today I decided to take a quiet stroll through the forest alone. The sun was high in the sky, its rays filtering through the trees, casting patterns of light and shadow across the forest floor. It was peaceful. Too peaceful, I realized later. I wandered off the beaten path, the ground soft beneath my boots as I stepped, over fallen branches and thick roots. The scent of pine and earth filled the air. I felt the usual comfort of being surrounded by nature, the usual calm that comes from being alone in the woods. But then something changed. It wasn't immediate, just a slow, creeping sensation that built over time. I couldn't pinpoint when it started, but I suddenly felt like I wasn't alone. The feeling of being watched. I stopped walking, my heart suddenly pounding in my chest. My breath quickened, but I told myself it was nothing. It was just the isolation, the quiet. It can mess with your mind. I shook my head and tried to dismiss the feeling, but the woods didn't feel quite so friendly anymore. I continued walking, trying to push the unease away, but the feeling grew stronger with each step. The breeze rustled the leaves above, but beneath that sound I could swear I heard something else, something faint like the softest footfall just beyond the reach of my hearing. I paused. "Hello," I called out, my voice shaking a little more than I intended. Silence. I glanced around, half expecting to see one of my friends emerge from behind a tree, laughing at me for being spooked. But there was nothing. Only the thick forest, the distant call of birds, and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. Then, another step. This one was louder, closer. I spun around, my heart racing, but again, nothing. Just trees. Just shadows. I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself. I knew it was just my mind playing tricks on me. Maybe it was an animal, something large moving through the underbrush. But then I saw it. A figure standing just at the edge of the tree line, barely visible in the shadows. At first, I thought it was one of my friends. Maybe someone had followed me without me noticing. But the more I looked, the more I realized something was off. The figure was too still, like it wasn't just standing but waiting, watching. I couldn't make out any features, no distinct shape, no movement. Just a vague silhouette in the dim light. I took a cautious step forward. "Hey," I called, trying to sound confident. "Who's there?" No response. I took another step, but then a loud crack echoed through the trees, like something large breaking beneath the weight of a heavy footstep. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. I knew that sound. It was too close. I spun around, my eyes wide. I could feel the presence behind me now, thick in the air, a weight that made it harder to breathe. But when I turned to look, nothing. No one was there. I didn't wait for anything else. I turned and sprinted back the way I came, my boots pounding the dirt, my heart hammering in my chest. The forest, which had seemed so welcoming earlier, now felt like a maze of shadows, every rustling leaf and breaking twig making me jump. I could still feel eyes on me, feel that invisible gaze pushing against my back. I didn't dare look behind me. The forest seemed to stretch on forever, the familiar path lost to me as I weaved between the trees. The panic surged within me. How long had I been walking? Was I lost? Suddenly, I broke through the trees into the clearing where we had set up camp. My friends were sitting by the fire, talking and laughing as if nothing was wrong. But when they saw the look on my face, their smiles faltered. "Hey, you okay?" Jake asked, his voice concerned. I couldn't answer right away. I was gasping for air, the tension still gripping me. I struggled to find the right words. There was someone out there. "What? Someone out in the woods?" Emma asked, standing up. I don't know," I said, shaking my head. "It was like a person. But I couldn't see them clearly. I thought they were following me, watching me." They exchanged glances, but no one spoke right away. Finally, Laura spoke up. "Maybe it was just your mind playing tricks on you. The woods can do that to people." I nodded, even though I wasn't sure I believed it. Maybe it was. Maybe it was just a trick of the shadows, the isolation, and the strange noises of the forest. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been there, something that wasn't human. The fire crackled in the silence. The forest stretched out beyond us, dark and foreboding. But for the first time that day, I didn't feel alone. and I couldn't help but wonder if it was still out there, watching. We set up our tents, gathered firewood, and got the fire going. The flames crackled and popped, sending a warm glow into the dark woods. We laughed, ate, and joked around. Everything felt normal, perfect even. But as the night wore on, something about the forest felt wrong. At first, I couldn't put my finger on it. The shadows of the trees seemed deeper than usual, and the wind had a peculiar, low hum to it. The firelight flickered in strange ways, casting dancing shadows that almost seemed too alive. I shook it off as being tired, maybe just the unfamiliarity of the forest playing tricks on me. Jake was the first to break the silence. "Hey, I'm going for a walk. Need some fresh air?" Emma, her face illuminated by the firelight, smiled. "Be careful, it gets pretty dark out there." Jake laughed, flashing a grin. "I'll be fine. Not like I'll get lost." He disappeared into the trees, his figure quickly swallowed by the darkness. I stared after him for a moment, suddenly aware of just how quiet the forest was. No rustling, leaves. No animal sounds. Just the occasional snap of twigs beneath our feet and the distant crackle of the fire. Minutes passed. "Maybe we should go check on him," I suggested. "He's been gone a while." Emma nodded, her eyes narrowed in thought. "You're right. Let's give him a few more minutes." We waited, but the feeling of unease only grew. The shadows seemed to stretch longer, the forest pressing in on us. I felt like something was watching, just out of sight, just behind the trees. I couldn't shake the sensation like eyes were on me, studying me. "That's it," I said, standing up. "I'm going after him." Emma followed, but she looked just as nervous as I felt. We both grabbed flashlights and, together, we ventured into the woods, the beam of light from our torches barely cutting through the dark. We walked deeper into the forest, calling Jake's name. The path was winding, the trees closing in as we moved farther from camp. The silence was oppressive, only broken by the distant calls of owls and the occasional rustle of branches. Still, no sign of Jake. Then, just as we were about to give up and turn back, I saw something in the distance, a figure standing just at the edge of the trees. It was too far to make out details, but it was there, still as a statue. "Jake," I called out. There was no response. My pulse quickened. I turned to Emma, but before I could speak, she whispered, "I don't think that's Jake." I nodded, heart pounding in my chest. Whoever or whatever it wasn't moving. It stood motionless, watching us, the shape only half visible in the gloom. "Let's go," I said, backing away slowly. But before I could take another step, the figure suddenly moved. It didn't walk. It didn't run. It glided, like it was floating just above the ground, its body swaying ever so slightly with each shift. I barely had time to process what I was seeing before it disappeared behind the trees, vanishing into the dark. Did you see that?" Emma gasped, her voice trembling. "I did," I whispered. "We need to get back to camp. Now." We turned and hurried back down the narrow trail, the forest feeling so much darker than it had when we entered. Every tree, every shadow seemed to twist and move in the corner of my eyes. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following us. We reached camp breathless, but Jake wasn't there. The fire was still burning low, but I could see the outlines of the tents in the dark. I turned to Emma. "Where is he?" Just as I asked the question, I heard it. A twig snapping from the direction of the trees behind us. We both froze, looking into the blackness beyond the firelight. The same figure, the one from earlier, emerged from the woods, this time standing, just outside the camp, silent and still. I swallowed hard, my breath catching in my throat. "That's not Jake," I whispered. Without warning, the figure stepped back into the trees. "Is it gone?" Emma asked, her voice tight with fear. I nodded, though I couldn't be sure. We stood there for a moment longer, listening. And then, finally, We heard it. Jake's voice, weak but clear. "Guys, where are you?" We ran toward the sound, finding Jake sitting at the edge of the clearing, his back against a tree, eyes wide in fear. "What happened?" I asked, kneeling beside him. "I don't know," he said, his voice trembling. "I was walking, and then I saw something. Something in the woods. It was watching me. It—" He stopped, shaking his head as if he couldn't find the words. "We saw it too," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We saw the same thing." For the rest of the night, we huddled around the fire, too scared to sleep. The forest was silent, but I knew we weren't alone. I could feel it, the presence watching from the darkness. It started as a simple hike, a way for me and a few friends to get away from the noise of the city for a weekend. We drove deep into the mountains, following narrow, winding roads until we reached the trailhead. The air was fresh, the scent of pine and damp earth filling my lungs as we unloaded our gear. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the forest floor. "This place looks perfect," Jake said, stretching his arms and breathing in the cool air. "Yeah, no cell service, just us in the woods," Emma added with a grin. We laughed, eager to leave behind the distractions of everyday life. We started off, the trail narrow and winding, surrounded by dense trees that seemed to close in on us as we ventured deeper into the forest. The birds were quiet now, and the usual rustle of leaves seemed distant, muffled. It felt peaceful at first. The forest was alive with the soft crunch of our boots on the dirt path, but there was something about the silence, unnatural. The deeper we went, the heavier the air became, as though the forest itself was holding its breath. "I think it's getting darker faster than usual," I said, glancing up at the sky. It was only late afternoon, but the trees above blocked most of the light. "Just a little more," Jake said, holding up his hand to show a bit of the map. "There's a great spot just up ahead. We can set up camp and relax for the night." Reluctantly, we agreed. The silence in the woods made me uneasy, but I shrugged it off. We'd be fine. After all, we'd been hiking for hours and it was still early evening. When we reached the clearing, it was like a breath of fresh air. The trees gave way to an open space surrounded by tall, looming pines. The ground was soft with fallen needles. We set up our tents and started a small fire, the warmth chasing away the chill that had begun to creep into the air. The firelight flickered in our eyes as we joked around, talking about everything and nothing. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. "Hey, do you hear that?" Emma asked suddenly, her voice breaking through the conversation. I paused, listening. At first, I heard nothing. Then, a faint whisper. It was so soft, so distant that I almost thought I had imagined it. "What do you mean?" Jake asked. Emma strained her ears. "I swear, I heard someone whispering." I shook my head, trying to push the creeping feeling aside. "It's probably just the wind," I said, though even I didn't fully believe it. The air was still. No wind, but then the whisper came again. I froze, my heart suddenly pounding in my chest. The voice was clearer now, though still just a faint murmur, indistinct, unintelligible. It was coming from somewhere in the trees, just beyond the light of the campfire. Jake's face turned pale. "Okay, this isn't funny anymore." We all fell silent, our eyes darting toward the shadows between the trees. The whisper came again, closer this time. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaky. "Is anyone out there?" There was no reply, just the whispering as if someone, or something, was moving just out of sight. "I think we should pack up and go," Emma whispered, standing up slowly. But the fire was dying, and the night was growing darker. My stomach churned. "Let's just wait a few more minutes," I suggested, though I wasn't sure if I believed my own words. The whisper came again, louder this time as though it were just behind me. My heart thudded in my chest. Okay, no, that's it. We're leaving. Jake grabbed his bag and we hurried to gather our things. But when I turned to look back toward the forest, I saw something moving between the trees. I couldn't make it out, but it was large. Tall. Maybe too tall for a normal person. Do you see that? I whispered, my breath catching in my throat. Everyone turned, staring at the shape in the shadows. It was gone in an instant. We didn't waste any time after that. We packed up the gear, leaving the dying fire behind, and scrambled to the edge of the clearing. The silence that followed felt like it was pressing in on us, the forest holding its breath again. As we hurried back toward the trail, I couldn't shake the feeling that the whispering was following us. Every time I glanced over my shoulder, I thought I saw shadows moving in the trees, something just out of sight, something tall and thin, too thin. Finally, we reached the car. I jumped in, not caring that we were all exhausted and scared out of our minds. As the engine roared to life and we pulled away, the forest seemed to close in behind us. For the rest of the drive, no one said a word. I don't think we ever talked about it after that night, but whenever I go near those woods again, I can still hear the whispers in the trees, and sometimes if I listen closely, I could swear I hear someone just behind me. I never thought a simple walk in the woods could turn into something so unsettling. It started out as a peaceful afternoon. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows through the trees. The forest was quiet, the only sounds being the crunch of leaves underfoot and the occasional bird call. It was the perfect escape from the stresses of life, or so I thought. I had decided to take a solo walk through the deep woods behind our cabin. My friends were back at the cabin, relaxing, but I needed a little time to clear my head. There was a trail I had walked many times before, a well-trodden path that looped through the trees and led to a small clearing by the creek. The sun was starting to dip below the horizon when I noticed how quiet the forest had become. Too quiet. The birds had stopped singing, and the rustling of animals was absent. At first, I shrugged it off. It was dusk, after all. Animals tended to be more active at different times, but the stillness gnawed at me. I pushed forward, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. The path narrowed as I ventured deeper, the trees growing denser, their trunks towering above me like silent sentinels. I pulled my jacket tighter around me, feeling an odd chill despite the mild weather. The trail curved ahead, leading into a dense thicket. The sun had almost set now, leaving the woods cloaked in a growing darkness. That was when I saw it. A figure. Eddie. First, I thought it was just a trick of the light or maybe some branch catching the fading sunlight. But no. There, standing just off the trail, was a tall figure. It was hard to make out, its edges blurred by the dim light, but the outline was unmistakable. A person? No, it wasn't quite right. It was too tall, its limbs unnaturally thin, stretching toward the trees like they were its anchors. Its head. It didn't seem to have one at all. I froze. My heart raced and every instinct in me screamed to turn back, but my feet were rooted to the ground. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, in the silence of the forest. I swallowed, hard, forcing my legs to work again. I took a step back, then another. The figure did not follow. Instead, it remained still, its form barely discernible in the thickening darkness. I turned and broke into a run, my breath coming in quick gasps as I tore down the path, the sound of my boots pounding against the earth the only thing I could hear. My mind screamed at me to stop, to turn and face whatever it was, but I couldn't. I had to get back to the cabin. The trees seemed to close in as I ran, the path twisting and turning. Every time I looked over my shoulder, the forest was empty, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. The eerie silence had returned, and I swore I could feel something lurking in the shadows behind me. I was almost at the clearing when I tripped, stumbling and falling onto the ground. My hands scraped against the rough earth and I gasped for air, heart pounding in my chest. But when I looked up, the sight that greeted me made my stomach turn. There, just a few feet away, the figure was standing at the edge of the clearing. It was closer now, its long, spindly limbs stretched out, but still it didn't move. It felt like it was waiting for something. The moon broke through the clouds, casting a pale light across the clearing, and for the first time, I saw it clearly. The figure had no eyes, no face. It was just a shape, but it exuded something dark, something unnatural, a presence that chilled me to my very core. I stumbled to my feet, fear locking my muscles in place. I couldn't tear my gaze away from it. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the figure disappeared into the trees. Gone. Not a sound, not a whisper of movement. I didn't waste a second longer. I turned and ran as fast as I could, my legs aching, my breath shallow. The clearing was behind me now, and I barely remembered the rest of the path. All I could think about was getting back to the cabin, to safety. When I finally burst through the door, my friends jumped in surprise. I slammed the door behind me, my heart still racing, chest heaving with panic. I tried to explain what happened, but my words were jumbled, incoherent. I felt like I was going to be sick. They didn't believe me, of course. They just thought I was overreacting. Too tired, maybe, or spooked by the solitude. But I knew what I saw. The figure didn't follow me back to the cabin, but I can't shake the feeling that it's still out there. In the woods, waiting, watching. I don't think I'll ever go back to that forest again.